We're back for a bit more reading today. I took too long of a break after a couple videos ago, and so the last video was me getting back into the groove of reading Jane Austen's writing, and it was not good for my brain. So I'm gonna keep the ball rolling, not to get through the book fast, but to like keep my out loud reading skills better. Keep things better. God. Oh my god, because we got the letters from Jane that said that Lydia's taken off with Wickham. Yeah, and I don't want to be like a victim blamer at all. We're not victim blaming, because Wickham's truly a bad guy, and I feel like he probably thinks that he's doing what he needs to do to win in this society. But it is ridiculous, and maybe even it's not that ridiculous, but in this society it actually really is crazy. And it's crazy that just like two people eloping could ruin a whole family, and maybe that's the crux of the issue. Maybe that's the horcrux of the issue. Maybe that's what's so silly about it. Okay. So we're back in right after Elizabeth and her uncle and aunt have left Lambton, and they're getting back home to see what Mr. Gardner could possibly do about this scandalous event. And Mr. Darcy was very compassionate and very good at like holding space for Elizabeth. Chapter 47. I have been thinking it over again, Elizabeth, said her uncle, as they drove from the town. And really, upon serious consideration, I am much more inclined than I was to judge as your eldest sister does on the matter. It appears to me so very unlikely that any young man should form such a design against a girl who is by no means unprotected or friendless, and who is actually staying in his colonel's family, that I am strongly inclined to hope the best. Could he expect that her friends would not step forward? Could he expect to be noticed again by the regiment after such an affront to Colonel Foster? His temptation is not adequate to the risk. Do you really think so? Cried Elizabeth, brightening up for a moment. Maybe this is all Wickham's attempt to like get back at Darcy and be like, Darcy will save me, and I'll just get all this money from Darcy. Maybe he knows Darcy's going to save the day, and this is his way of getting back at Darcy. I don't know if there's any commentary on that, but that's just the thought that came into my head. Upon my word, said Mrs. Gardner, I begin to be of your uncle's opinion. It is really too great a violation of decency, honour, and interest for him to be guilty of. I cannot think so very ill of Wickham. Can you yourself, Lizzie, so wholly give him up as to believe him capable of it? Not, perhaps, of neglecting his own interest, but of every other neglect I can believe him capable, if indeed it should be so, but I dare not hope it. Why should they not go on to Scotland if that had been the case? Yeah, and Elizabeth is also like, I used to like this man, and my judgment, I feel like your compass is just like, how could I like this man who's absolutely terrible and just believe everything he said? And be convinced that Darcy is an awful man and he's the only one showing up. Ugh. In the first place, replied Mr. Gardner, there is no absolute proof that they are not gone to Scotland. Oh, but their removing from the chaise into a hackney coach is such a presumption. Why? Why is that a presumption? Why is it a presumption for them to switch just to like not let anybody be hot on their trails? Okay, sorry. I'm gonna write this down because again, I don't have my looking up. My husband took all my goodies to look things up, and I can't do it on my phone because my phone's indisposed doing the recording. Removing from the chaise into a hackney. What's up with that? Why is that a presumption? And besides, no traces of them were to be found on the Barnet Road. Well, then, supposing them to be in London, they may be there, though for the purpose of concealment, for no more exceptional purpose. It is not likely that money should be very abundant on either side, and it might strike them that they could be more economically, though less expeditiously, married in London than in Scotland. None of them have any money. They can't even make it to Scotland. But why all this secrecy? Why any fear of detection? Why must their marriage be private? Oh, no, no, this is not likely. His most particular friend, you see by Jane's account, was persuaded of his never intending to marry her. Oh, right. Wickham will never marry a woman without some money. He cannot afford it. And what claims has Lydia? What attractions has she beyond youth, health, and good humour that could make him, for her sake, forego every chance of benefiting himself by marrying well? As to what restraint the apprehensions of disgrace in the core, C-O-R-P-S, core. I just don't know how to, tell the video that I'm actually reading the word core, like Marine Corps. The coal. As to what restraint the apprehensions of disgrace in the coal might throw on a dishonourable elopement with her, I am not able to judge, for I know nothing of the effects that such a step might produce. But as to your other objection, I am afraid it will hardly hold good. Lydia has no brothers to set forward, and he might imagine, from my father's behaviour, from his indolence, and the little attention he has ever seemed to give to what was going on forward in his family, that he would do as little and think as little about it as any father could do in such a matter. So her father's just shows so little attention. But what can you think that Lydia is so lost to everything but love of him as to the consent to live with him on any other terms other than marriage? It does seem, and it is most shocking indeed, replied Elizabeth, with tears in her eyes, that a sister's sense of decency and virtue in such a point should admit of doubt. But really I know not what to say. Perhaps I am not doing her justice, but she is very young. She has never been taught to think on serious subjects, and for the last half year, nay, for a 12 month, a year, she has been given up to nothing but amusement and vanity. She has been allowed to dispose of her time in the most idle and frivolous manner, and to adopt any opinions that came in her way. Since the Shire were first quartered in Meryton, nothing but flirtation, love, and officers have been in her head. She has been doing everything in her power by thinking and talking on the subject, to give greater, what shall I call it, susceptibility to her feelings, which are naturally lively enough. And we all know that Wickham has every charm of person and address that can captivate a woman. But you see that Jane, said her aunt, does not think very ill of Wickham as to believe him incapable of the attempt. Of whom does Jane ever think ill? And who is there, whatever might be their former conduct, that she would think capable of such an attempt till it were proved against them? But Jane knows as well as I do what Wickham really is. We both know that he has been profligate in every sense of the word, and he has neither integrity nor honour, that he is as false and deceitful as he is insinuating. And do you really know all of this? Cried Mrs. Gardiner, whose curiosity as to the mode of her intelligence was all alive. I do indeed, replied Elizabeth, colouring. I told you the other day of his infamous behaviour to Mr. Darcy, and you yourself, when last at Longbourn, heard in what manner he spoke of the man who had behaved with such forbearance and liberality towards him. And there are other circumstances which I am not at liberty, which is not worthwhile to relate, but his lies about the whole Pemberley family are endless. From what he has said of Miss Darcy, I was thoroughly prepared to see a proud, reserved, disagreeable girl, yet he knew to the contrary himself. He must know that she was amiable and unpretending as we have found her. But does Lydia know anything of this? Can she be ignorant of what you and Jane seem so well to understand? Oh, yes, that is the worst of it all. That is the worst of all. Till I was in Kent, I saw so much of both Mr. Darcy and his relation, Colonel Fitzwilliam, that I was ignorant of the truth myself. And when I returned home, the Shire was to leave Meryton in a week, a fortnight's time. And that was the case. Neither Jane, to whom I related the whole, nor I thought it necessary to make our knowledge public. The gang, the regiment was leaving, so we thought, nothing's happened so far, we're safe. Let's just not talk crap about Mr. Wickham. For of what use could it apparently be to anyone that the good opinion which all the neighbourhood had of him should be overthrown? That's very nice. And even when it was settled that Lydia should go with Mr. Foster, the necessity of opening her eyes to his character never occurred to me. That she could be in danger from the deception never entered my head. That was such consequence as this could ensue, you may easily believe, was far enough from my thoughts. When they've all removed to Brighton, therefore you had no reason, I suppose, to believe them fond of each other. Not the slightest. I can remember no symptom of affection on either side. And had anything of the kind been perceptible, you must be aware that ours is not a family on which it could be thrown away. When first he entered the corps, she was ready enough to admire him, but so were we all. Every girl in or near Meryton was out of her senses about him for the first 2 months. But he never distinguished her by any particular attention, and consequently, after a moderate period of extravagant and wild admiration, her fancy for him gave way, and others of the regiment who treated her with more distinction again became her favourites. Nobody knows who Lydia likes. She likes them all, and she wants all of them. Ugh. Yikes. Why did we send her to Brighton with all of the men? It may be easily believed that however little novelty could be added to their fears, hopes, and conjectures on this interesting subject, by its repeated discussion no other could detain them from it long during the whole of the journey. From Elizabeth's thoughts it was never absent. Fixed there by the keenest of all anguish self-reproach, she could find no interval of ease or forgetfulness. They travelled as expeditiously as possible. Expeditiously. Yes. And sleeping one night on the road, reached Longbourn by dinner time the next day. It was every comfort to Elizabeth to consider that Jane could not have been wearied by long expectations. The little gardeners, attracted by the sight of a chaise, were standing on the steps of the house as they entered the paddock. And when the carriage drove up to the door, the joyful surprise that lighted up their faces and displayed itself over their whole bodies in a variety of capers and frisks. What's a caper and frisk? Was the first pleasing earnest of their welcome. I'm going to go ahead and just write down capers and frisks. That's a funny saying, and we don't use it anymore, and I would love to learn about it. Elizabeth jumped out, and after giving each of them a hasty kiss, hurried into the vestibule, where Jane, who came running down from her mother's apartment, immediately met her. Elizabeth, as she affectionately embraced her, whilst tears filled the eyes of both, lost not a moment in asking whether anything had been heard of the fugitives. Not yet, replied Jane, but now that my dear uncle is come, I hope everything will be well. Is my father in town? Town? Yes, he went on Tuesday, as I wrote you word. And have you heard from him often? We have only heard once. No. We have heard only twice. He wrote me a few lines on Wednesday to say that he had arrived in safety and to give me his directions, which I particularly begged him to do. He merely added that he should not write again till he had something of importance to mention. And my mother, how is she? How are you all? My mother is tolerably well, I trust, though her spirits are greatly shaken. She is upstairs, and I will have great satisfaction in seeing you all. She does not yet leave her dressing room. Mary and Kitty, thank heaven, are quite well. But you, how are you? Cried Elizabeth. You look pale. How much you must have gone through. Her sister, however, assured her of her being perfectly well. And their conversation, which had been passing while Mr. and Mrs. Gardiner were engaged with their children, was now put to an end by the approach of the whole party. Jane ran to her uncle and aunt, and welcomed and thanked them both with alternate smiles and tears. That's fun. When they were all in the drawing-room, the questions which Elizabeth had already asked were of course repeated by the others, and they soon found that Jane had no intelligence to give. The sanguine hope of good, however, which the benevolence of her heart suggested had not yet deserted her. She still expected that it would all end well, and that every morning would bring some letter either from Lydia or her father to explain their proceedings and perhaps announce their marriage. Mrs. Bennet, to whose apartment they all repaired, after a few minutes' conversation together, received them exactly as might be expected, with tears and lamentations of regret, invectives against the villainous conduct of Wickham. We're doing like an alliteration thing. Investisives? God, I really need a dictionary. I really should just have a dictionary. I'm going to buy a dictionary. Just get a dictionary, Emily. Okay. Investives. Where am I? Oh, I'm over here. Hello? What? Investives against the villainous conduct of Wickham, and complaints of her own suffering and ill usage, blaming everybody but the person to whose ill-judging indulgence the errors of her daughter must principally be owing. If I had been able, said she, to carry my point in going to Brighton with all my family, this would have not happened. But poor dear Lydia had nobody to take care of her. Why did the Fosters ever let her go out of their sight? I am sure there was some great neglect on their side, for she is not the kind of girl to do such a thing, as she had been well looked after. Her own judgment's not that good. I always thought they were very unfit to have the charge of her, but I was overruled, as I always am. Poor dear child. And now here's Mr. Bennet gone away, and I know he will fight Wickham wherever he meets him, and then he will be killed, and what is to become of us all? And then the Collinses will turn us out before he's cold in his grave, and if you are not kind to us, brother, I do not know what we shall do. That's really funny to me. He's going to be killed. They all exclaimed against such terrific ideas, and Mr. Gardiner, after general assurances of his affection for her and all her family, told her that he meant to be in London the very next day, and would assist Mr. Bennet in every endeavour from recovering Lydia, and promises not to let Mr. Bennet die. Do not give way to useless alarm, he added. Though it is right to be prepared for the worst, there is no occasion to look on it as certain. It is not quite a week since they left Brighton. In a few days more we may gain some news of them. Until we know that they are not married and have no design of marrying, do not let us give the matter over as lost. As soon as I get to town, I shall go to my brother and make him come home with me to Gracechurch Street, and then we may consult together as to what is to be done. Oh, my dear brother, replied Mrs. Bennet, that is exactly what I could wish for more. No, it's the dyslexia coming out again. That is exactly what I could most wish for. And now do, when you get out of town, find them out wherever they may be. And if they are not married already, make them marry. And as for wedding clothes, do not let them wait for that, but tell Lydia she shall have as much money as she chooses to buy them after they are married. And above all, keep Mr. Bennet from fighting. Tell him what a dreadful state I am in, and I am frightened out of my wits, and have such tremblings and flutterings all over me, such spasms in my side, and pains in my head, and such beatings at my heart, that I get no rest by night nor by day. And tell my dear Lydia not to give any directions about her clothes till she has seen me, for she does not know which are the best warehouses. Oh, brother, how kind you are! I know you will contrive it all. But Mr. Gardiner, though he assured her again of his earnest endeavours in the cause, could not avoid recommending moderation to her. Moderation, as well as in her hopes and fears, And after talking with her in this manner till dinner was on the table, they all left her to vent all her feelings. They all left her to vent all her feelings on the housekeeper, poor Mrs. Hill, who attended in the absence of her daughters. I know you said you don't like talking to anybody, but please stop talking to all of us and just talk to the housekeeper. Oh my God. Imagine what who that housekeeper told. Just going around, girl. Don't tell the housekeeper. Though her brother and sister were persuaded that there was no real occasion for such a seclusion from the family, they did not attempt to oppose it, for they knew that she had not prudence enough to hold her tongue before the servants, while they waited at table, and judged it better that one only of the household, and the one whom they could most trust, should comprehend all her fears and solicitude on the subject. Interesting. In the dining room they were soon joined by Mary and Kitty, who had been too busily engaged in their separate apartments to make their appearance before. One came for her books, and the other from her toilet. The faces of both, however, were tolerably calm. They said, "We have heard this for the last week. We've heard all of this, and we're dissociating. Like, I just want to read my book." Worrying clearly doesn't do much, though it's sometimes impossible not to. I get it. And no change was visible in either except the loss of her favourite sister, or anger which she had herself incurred in this business, had given more of fretfulness than usual to the accents of Kitty. As for Mary, she was mistress enough of herself to whisper to Elizabeth, with a countenance of grave reflection, soon after they were seated at the table, "Oh my God, what does Mary say? This is a most unfortunate affair, and will probably be much talked of. But we must stem the tide of malice. We must stem the tide of malice, and pour into the wounded bosoms of each other the balm of sisterly consolation." Why is Mary's like 17, going on 70? The wounded bosom of each other, the balm of sisterly consolation. Then, perceiving in Elizabeth no inclination of replying, she added, "Unhappy as the event must be for Lydia, we may draw from it this useful lesson. The loss of virtue in a female is irretrievable. That one false step involves her in endless ruin. That her reputation is no less brittle than it is beautiful, and that she cannot be too much guarded in her behavior towards the undeserving of the other sex." That sums up like the entire book. I feel like that sums up, like, Mary is actually the voice of Jane Austen. That's so funny. Elizabeth said, "Yeah, right. Elizabeth lifted up her eyes in amazement, but was too much oppressed to make any reply. Mary, however, continued to console herself with such kind of moral extractions from the evil before them. She said, "I'll read Fordyce's sermons." Elizabeth, I don't even know what Fordyce's sermons is, actually. I know that was like so long ago, and I just didn't look it up then, but it just popped into my head. Okay. In the afternoon, the two elder Miss Bennets were able to be for half an hour by themselves, and Elizabeth instantly availed herself to the opportunity of making any inquiries which Jane was equally eager to satisfy. After joining in general, it is so nice to have a friend who you can just be like, "Oh my God," like, to not feel judged by like your crappy opinions and just be like, "Oh, can you believe this is what this person," it just feels really good to like be seen by somebody and you're like, "I know I'm not my best self, but they're not their best selves either, and we love each other, and we're just gonna be, sisterly affection is so important these days, of just like, we're not perfect, and I have my friend that I can be absolutely not perfect with, and that feels really good, instead of just like, I have to be morally and talking perfectly to everybody all the time." This is a good friendship and sister relationship. After joining in general lamentations over the dreadful sequel of this event, which Elizabeth considered as all but certain, and Miss Bennet could not assert to be wholly impossible, the former continued the subject by saying, "But tell me all and everything about which I have not already heard. Give me further particulars. What did Colonel Foster say? And had they no apprehension of anything before the elopement took place? They must have seen them together forever." Colonel Foster did not own that he had often suspected some partiality, especially on Lydia's side, but nothing to give him any alarm. Especially on Lydia's side. That's interesting. Did own that he often suspected some partiality. Okay. I thought I got confused. But nothing to give him alarm. Yeah, it's just Lydia being Lydia. Okay, I'm so grieved for him. His behavior was attentive and kind to the utmost. He was coming to us in order to assure us of his concern before he had any idea of their not being gone to Scotland. When the apprehension first got abroad, it hastened his journey. Isn't Scotland an island? Like, they're gonna, like... Wait, is Ireland... Oh, now I'm embarrassed. Forget that I said anything. Northern Ireland is on the same... I'm upset at myself now because I'm thinking like they just drove to Scotland. I'm so embarrassed. It's like I don't think about it all the time and then I forget. Northern Ireland and Scotland is a part, but then Ireland is an island. I am terrible. I feel terrible and awful, and I'm the worst, and I feel like a terrible, awful American. I'm just a stupid American. This is awful. They were just going to drive to Scotland, so Scotland must be... Let me just go look at a map really quick. Hold on. God, this is embarrassing. Ireland is an island, and Scotland is the top of England. Okay. Scotland is above there, and Ireland is an island, and Northern Ireland is like a separate, it's like the Republic of Ireland. I'm so embarrassed. They could drive to Scotland. I thought they had to take a boat, and that's so stupid. Ignore. I'll have my editor Emily cut that out. We're gonna cut this out. That's so embarrassing. Obviously I knew that Ireland was an island. I just, in my brain, I was like, wait, Scotland. It's okay. You're okay. Everything's okay. We're allowed to make mistakes. Just had a brain fart for a second. That's so depressing. Oh, Colonel Foster did own that he had often suspected some partiality, especially on Lydia's side, but nothing to give him any alarm. I am so grieved for him. His behaviour was so attentive and kind to the utmost. He was coming to us in order to assure us of his concern before he had any idea of their not being gone to Scotland, which they could drive to. Thank you. The Highlands, right? When that apprehension first got abroad, it hastened his journey. And was Denny convinced that Wickham would not marry? Did he know of their intending to go off? Had Colonel Foster even seen Denny himself? Yes, but when questioned by him, Denny denied knowing anything of their plans and would not give his real opinion about it. Oh, Denny. He did not repeat his persuasion of their not marrying, and from that I'm inclined to hope. He might have been misunderstood before. Until Colonel Foster came himself, not one of you entertained a doubt, I suppose, of their being really married? How was it possible that such an idea should enter our brains? I felt a little uneasy, a little fearful of my sister's happiness with him in marriage, because I knew his conduct had not been always quite right. My father and mother knew nothing of that, and they only felt how imprudent a match it must be. Kitty then owned, with a very natural triumph on knowing more than the rest of us, that in Lydia's last letter she had prepared her for such a step. She had known, it seems, of their being in love with each other many weeks. But not before they went to Brighton? No, I believe not. And did Colonel Foster appear to think well of Wickham himself? Does he know his real character? I must confess that he did not speak so well of Wickham as he formerly did. He believed him to be imprudent and extravagant. And since this sad affair has taken place, it is said that he left Meryton greatly in debt. But I hope this may be false. Oh, Jane, had we been less secret, had we told what we knew of him, this could not have happened. Perhaps it would have been better, replied her sister, but to expose the former faults of any person without knowing what their present feelings were seemed unjustifiable. We acted to the best intentions. Could Colonel Foster repeat the particulars of Lydia's note to his wife? He brought it with him for us to see. Jane then took it from her pocket-book and gave it to Elizabeth. These were the contents. My dear Harriet, this is from Lydia to Colonel Foster's wife, Mrs. Foster. Harriet Foster. My dear Harriet, you will laugh when you know I am gone, and I cannot help laughing myself as to your surprise tomorrow morning as soon as I am missed. I am going to Gretna Green, and if you cannot guess with who, I shall think you a simpleton, for there is but one man in the world I love, and he is an angel. I should never be happy without him, so think it no harm to be off. You need not send them word at Longbourn of my going, if you do not like it, for it will make the surprise the greater when I write them and sign my name, Lydia Wickham. What a good joke it will be! She's just a jokester. She just loves to have fun. I can hardly write for laughing. Pray make my excuses to Pratt for not keeping my engagement and dancing with him tonight. Tell him I hope he will excuse me when he knows all, and tell him I will dance with him at the next ball when we meet, with great pleasure. I shall send for my clothes when I get to Longbourn, but I wish you would tell Sally to mend a great slit in my worked muslin gown before they are packed up. Goodbye. Give my love to Colonel Foster. I hope you will drink to our good journey. Your affectionate friend, Lydia Bennet. Oh, thoughtless, Lydia, cried Elizabeth, when she had finished it. What a letter is this, to be written at such a moment! But at least it shows that she was serious on the subject of the journey. Whatever he might afterwards persuade her to, it was not on her side a scheme of infamy. My poor father, how he must have felt it. I never saw anyone so shocked. He could not speak a word for full 10 minutes. My mother was taken ill immediately, and the whole house in such confusion. Oh, Jane, cried Elizabeth, was there a servant belonging to it who did not know the whole story before the end of the day? I do not know. I hope there was, but to be guarded at such a time is very difficult. My mother is in hysterics. And though I endeavored to give her every assistance in my power, I'm afraid I did not do so much as I might have done. But the horror of what might possibly happen almost took me for my faculties. Sometimes it's really, really difficult to read, especially when I just remembered that I didn't remember that Ireland was an island. I'm very distracted by that. It's terrible, and I feel awful. Okay. It's so hard to read sometimes. Your attendance upon her has been too much for you. You do not look well. Oh, that I had been with you. You have every care and anxiety upon yourself alone. Mary and Kitty have been very kind, and would have shared in every fatigue, I am sure, but I did not think it right for either of them. Kitty is slight and delicate, and Mary studies so much that her hours of repose should not be broken in on. My Aunt Phillips came to Longbourn on Tuesday, after my father went away, and was so good to stay till Thursday with me. She was of great use and comfort to us all, and Lady Lucas has been very kind. She walked here on Wednesday morning to condole with us, and offered her services, or any of her daughters, if they should be of use to us. She had better have stayed at home, cried Elizabeth. Perhaps she meant well, but under such a misfortune as this, one cannot see too little of one's neighbours. Assistance is impossible, condolence insufferable. Let them triumph over us at distance and be satisfied. Don't go poking around to see what drama you can find out. Like, keep keep your nose out of our business because you're just going to tell the whole rest of the world about it. I get it. I like that. Let them triumph over us at a distance. Because it was Mrs. Bennet who was like, I wish your daughter, Mrs. Lucas, would be married, but it's probably never going to happen. And now she's married and none of them are married. Okay. She then proceeded to inquire into the measures which her father had intended to pursue while in town for the recovery of his daughter. He meant, I believe, replied Jane, to go to Epsom salts, the place where they last changed horses, to see the postilions. Postilions. Is that the post? The post office is postilions? Okay, I got another thing to write down and look up. Postilions. There's so much I don't know, and I'm so embarrassed. See the postilions and try if anything could be made out of them. His principal object must be to discover the number of hackney coach which took them from Clapham. Is it Clapham? Clapham. Clapham. It's embarrassing. It had come with a fare from London, as he thought that the circumstance of a gentleman and ladies removing from one carriage to another might be remarked. He meant to make inquiries at Clapham. If he could, however, discover at what house the coachman had before set down his fare, he determined to make inquiries there, and hope it might not be impossible to find out the stand and number of the coach. I do not know of any other designs that he had formed, but he was in such a hurry to be gone, and his spirits so greatly discomposed, that I had difficulty in finding out even so much as this. Whew, the never-ending chapter. On to chapter 48. All right. Everybody in England and Scotland and Wales and Ireland and everybody in Europe. I'm not good at geography. I mean, I even dated an Irish person one time and we planned this whole trip and we were going to go all these different places, and I know it is an island. It's just been so long. How embarrassing. All right, well, thanks for reading along and watching along, and I'll be in better next time. Good luck next time. Better luck next time, everybody. And come back to listen to me fumble through the last third or quarter of this book. And I have much to look up, and hopefully I'll get my laptop back so the quality will be a little better. And we're really plugging through. Next time, chapter 48, XLVIII. Ta-ta. Happy reading, everybody.